Listen closely, because a basketball writer from Britain, a man who for years treated the New York Knicks as the great running joke of American sport, sat down this offseason to break down the new NBA champions, and what started as cold analysis turned into something he clearly wasn't prepared for. And I need you to stay with me all the way to the end, because the final line he delivered about this city and this team genuinely gave me goosebumps, and I promise it's going to stay in your head. But you have to understand the whole journey, because this man did not walk in as a fan. He walked in as a skeptic who had spent a decade laughing. Let me set it up. Over in Britain, the NBA has exploded in popularity, and the Knicks were always the punchline. The richest, loudest, most tortured franchise in the league. The team from the biggest city that somehow never won. 53 years without a title. Half a century of heartbreak, of false dawns, of a fan base that suffered more than almost any other in the sport. This writer had made his share of jokes over the years, so when he sat down to analyze the champion Knicks, he opened, honestly, with a bit of disbelief, almost like he still couldn't quite process that it had actually happened. And then he watched how they did it, and the tone changed completely. The first thing that got him was the sheer weight of the number, 53 years. He kept coming back to it. He said in Britain, they understand long droughts. They understand what it means for a proud club and a proud city to wait generations for a trophy, to pass the longing down from grandparent to parent to child. And he said that's exactly what the Knicks and New York had endured since 1973. And this year, finally, they ended it, beating the San Antonio Spurs 4-1 in the finals. He said you cannot analyze this team properly without first understanding the emotional magnitude of what they broke. This wasn't just a championship, it was the lifting of a curse that had hung over the world's most famous arena for over half a century. Then he got into how they actually won it, and this is where the respect started pouring out. He talked about Jalen Brunson first, and here's the detail that clearly floored him. Brunson led this team to the title while playing through a wrist injury, an injury he then had surgery on only after the parade, after the job was done. The writer said that's the kind of toughness that becomes folklore, the kind of story a city tells for generations. A captain who refused to come off the floor, who dragged his team to a championship on a damaged shooting hand, and only let the doctors touch it once the trophy was secured. He said that's not just talent. That's the stuff of legend. Then he went through the rest of the core, and each name earned a nod. Karl Anthony Towns, the skilled big man who stretches the floor and punishes defenses inside and out. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, the two long, switchable wing defenders who let this team smother the best offenses in the league. Josh Hart, the relentless do-everything glue guy who does all the dirty work that never shows up on a highlight reel but wins you playoff games. And over all of it, the head coach, Mike Brown, who took this group and got them over the mountain that had defeated every Knicks team for 5 decades. The writer said what impressed him most was the balance. This wasn't a team that bought a title with one superstar. It was a genuine, connected, two-way team, built on defense and toughness and chemistry. The most old-fashioned, hard-nosed way to win. Very New York, he said. And then he spent a long stretch on the history itself, because he said the number is impossible to overstate. 53 years. He did the math out loud for his audience. The last time the Knicks were champions, back in 1973, most of the people celebrating this title weren't even born. Entire lifetimes had passed. Grandparents who watched the last one had died without ever seeing another. He said in Britain, they have clubs with droughts like that, proud institutions that go generations without lifting the biggest trophy, and he said the ache of it becomes part of the identity, part of what it means to support the club. And then, one magical spring, it breaks, and the release, the catharsis, the flood of decades of bottled up longing is unlike anything else in sport. He said that's what New York just experienced. 53 years of ache, released in a single night. Then he went deeper on how they were built, because he wanted to understand whether this was luck or design, and he came away convinced it was design. He talked about how the Knicks constructed a genuine, old-fashioned two-way monster, a team that could score with anyone but that one ultimately on defense and toughness. He praised the way the front office assembled complementary stars rather than a collection of ball-dominant egos. A lead guard in Brunson who sets the tone, a versatile big in Towns who stretches and punishes, and then that suffocating wing defense in Bridges and Anunoby that let them switch everything and strangle the league's best offenses in the biggest moments. He said championship defenses win championships, and the Knicks built one deliberately, brick by brick over several seasons. This wasn't an accident, he said. This was a plan that took years of patience and finally paid off. Then he circled back to Brunson, because the captain clearly captured his imagination. He said, "Great champions need a heartbeat, a leader whose will becomes the team's will." And the story of Brunson dragging this team to a title through a wrist injury, then having surgery only after the parade, is exactly the kind of tale that gets told in that arena for the next 50 years. He compared it to the folklore of the franchise's past heroes, the legends whose toughness became myth. He said New York is a city that respects one thing above all else: guts. And Brunson gave them guts in its purest form. A captain who would not come off the floor. A leader who bled for the badge. The analyst said that's the kind of player a city doesn't just cheer. It adopts him forever. He also gave a lot of credit to the coach, Mike Brown, and to the front office's discipline this offseason. He noted that after winning it all, the Knicks resisted the classic champion's temptation to blow it up and chase flashy names, and instead focused on continuity. He re-signing key rotation pieces, bringing back their bench scoring and their perimeter defense, and smartly patching their biggest hole. He said the smartest thing a champion can do is recognize that chemistry is the hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to destroy, and that the Knicks clearly understood that. They kept the band together. They protected what made them special. That, he said, is the move of an organization that knows exactly what it has. And then he did something that made me trust him. Because right as the praise was building to a crescendo, he stopped and he said, "But if I only tell you how good they are, you'll think I've gone soft. So let me be honest about what could go wrong, because defending this is harder than winning it." And the video turned into something more credible than a highlight package, because he laid out the real challenges, and Knicks fans need to hear them clearly. First, the money. He explained that the Knicks are pressed right up against what the league calls the second apron, a financial ceiling that, once crossed, handcuffs a team's ability to improve itself, limiting it mostly to minimum contracts and its own draft picks. He said the champions are, in a sense, locked in as they are. They can maintain, but they can't easily upgrade. Second, they lost a key piece. Their starting rim protector and rebounder, Mitchell Robinson, departed in free agency. He signed with the Celtics, and the Knicks had to patch that hole by bringing in the veteran Andre Drummond on a cheap one-year deal. It's a reasonable fix, but the writer questioned whether it fully replaces what they lost on the interior. And third, the biggest one, the East is coming for them. He pointed out that rivals are loading up specifically to knock the champions off. He mentioned Toronto adding a former Finals MVP to an already dangerous core, and that repeating as champion is exponentially harder than winning the first time, because now everyone circles your name and plays you like it's their Super Bowl every single night. And here's why that honesty made the ending land so hard. Because after laying out every reason the Knicks might not repeat, he leaned back and delivered the emotional turn. He said the mark of a real observer of sport is the ability to separate the analysis from the meaning, and that while the analysis says repeating will be difficult, the meaning of what New York just accomplished is untouchable. Nobody can take away what happened. 53 years of waiting ended. He said he'd covered a lot of championships, but there was something about this one. The size of the city, the length of the wait, the toughness of the group that finally did it, that moved him in a way he didn't expect. And then came the peak, the part that got me, the identity payload for every Knicks fan who ever suffered. He said he thought about the fans. The ones who'd been coming to that building for decades, who brought their kids, who brought their kids' kids, who kept believing through every gut punch, every blown lead, every heartbreak, every year that ended in disappointment. He said those fans didn't just watch a team win a trophy, they watched a promise get kept. The promise that if you stay loyal long enough, if you keep the faith through the darkest years, eventually the wait ends and the payoff comes. He said that's the purest thing in all of sport, and the Knicks and their people finally got to feel it. He said he'd stop laughing now, because a franchise that endures 53 years of pain and comes out the other side as champion hasn't earned mockery, it's earned reverence. And before he closed, he added one more thought that pulled the whole thing together. He said the beautiful cruelty of sport is that the wait makes the triumph mean more. A franchise that wins every few years learns to take it for granted. A franchise that waits 53 years learns to treasure every second of it. The parade, the tears, the strangers hugging in the street, the grandparents who finally got to see it before it was too late. He said New York didn't just win a championship. New York got its reward for a half-century of unbroken faith, and he said that kind of catharsis changes a city's relationship with its team forever. These fans will never again wonder whether the loyalty is worth it. They have their answer. It's engraved on a trophy, 53 years in the making. And then he did the thing he promised at the very beginning. He set down his notes, looked straight into the camera, and delivered the closing line. The one that gave me goosebumps. He said, "For 53 years, New York was the biggest city in the world with the smallest trophy case." They were the joke, and I told a few of those jokes myself, but I won't tell them anymore, because the Knicks aren't visitors at the top of this sport anymore. They aren't tourists. After half a century, they finally came home, and the rest of the league had better get used to the view, because these Knicks intend to stay, and that's where it ended, and I had to just sit with it for a moment. Because he's right, isn't he? For so long, being a Knicks fan meant loving something that never loved you back the way you deserved. It meant hope that got punished, year after year after year. And then a man from across the ocean, a man who used to mock this team, looked hard at what they became. A tough, connected championship team led by a captain who played through a broken wrist and refused to quit. And he couldn't laugh anymore. He could only respect it. 53 years ended by a team built the hard way, the right way, the New York way. And maybe that's the part that lingers most, that after half a century of chasing shortcuts and quick fixes, the Knicks finally won by doing it the unglamorous way. Defense, toughness, chemistry, and a captain who wouldn't quit. There's a justice to that. The city that waited the longest won it the most honest way there is. And a man from across the ocean who once laughed, looked at all of it and could only tip his cap. So now I want to hear from you, and I promise I read every comment down there. Do you agree with him? Can the Knicks defend this title? Or is the pressure of the second apron and the loss of Mitchell Robinson going to catch up with them in a stacked Eastern Conference? Who's the biggest threat coming for the crown? And does it even matter, given what this team already proved it's made of? And for the fans who lived through the 53-year wait, where does this championship rank among the greatest moments of your entire life as a sports fan? I genuinely want to know. Because a title this long in the making means something different to everyone who suffered for it. Drop your take below and let's get into it. I'll be right there replying. And if this one hit you in the chest the way it hit me, do me a favor and smash that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so the algorithm knows to show you the next one. Because in the very next video, I've got a foreign voice breaking down one of the biggest teams in American football. And what they said about that roster is going to spark a serious argument. Trust me, once you hear this next one, you're going to want to send it to every fan of that team you know, and because it does not hold back. You won't want to miss it. I'll see you there.